Losing a finger is unbelievably painful. It's like you have this need to try and move it, to flex it. But all it does is burn your exposed nerves. It shoots this white, hot lightning kind of pain straight through your arm with every heartbeat. I tried my best to just keep my hand still, but even the breeze from moving forward shot through me. There were so many nerves. It felt like licking a live wire. Leah Babin almost carried me through the woods. She was amazingly strong for her size, and I got the impression that she could just whisk me off the ground if she wanted. There was something about putting my arm around her that just didn't sit right. Like she had particularly thick skin and a weird bone structure around her shoulder blades. John said you wouldn't harm me. I managed to puff out in between groans. Well, Leah smiled. I said we'd try. I also said if my dear brother couldn't stop himself, I'd bite his head off. I recalled John mentioning that, but I thought it was a figure of speech. But considering what I'd just heard, and the amount of blood dripping from her jaw, I was considering that it might be more literal than I anticipated. I was rushed back. Leah helped me up the stairs, into my apartment, and started to boil towels. She brought a first aid kit from a supply closet. I got the impression that she handled wounds like this before, but I was too panicked to think about it. Her confidence was all I needed. She kept reassuring me that things would be fine, that I just had to wait and trust her. What choice did I have? Roughly 30 minutes after we got back, Uncle John came bursting through the door. Without skipping a beat, he pushed Leah away from me. When she stepped forward with a fresh towel, he grabbed her by the throat. I got up and backed into a corner.
What the fuck did I say?
John screamed.
Is this what we agreed on? For you to have my family fucking mutilated?
It's just a finger, John. And besides, I don't know where he got the knife from. It seemingly just appeared in his hand as he pushed it up against her throat. I saw a trickle of blood.
No more,
he growled.
No more smirking. No more bullshit. You broke our deal, and you're on my shit list.
Roy paid the price.
Ha! You honestly think they'll trick me?
John laughed.
I worked for Hatchet. I've read your goddamn Galapagos file. And if I see a single one of you in the same fucking hallway as either of us, I'm cooking you and your fucking eggs in hydrochloric acid.
Leah stopped smiling. A darkness sunk over her face as she locked eyes with John.
You heard me. I know.
John grinned. Something he said had struck a nerve. And Leah could tell this wasn't the time to put on the charm. This was serious. Dead serious. In the literal sense. Fine, she said. You got until the end of the year. Then we're through.
I'm not doing shit for you from now on,
spat John.
You stay out of my way. Don't test me.
You'll have no protection.
If this is what your protection looks like, then you can scamper right back to your nest, you fucking dodo.
He pushed her into the fridge, making the cupboards rattle. Leah covered her throat and left. No smirk, no snide comments. John sat me down and gave me a hug. He handed me the towel that Leah had gotten for me and helped me wrap it around my finger.
You're gonna be okay, he said. We're gonna fix this.
I hadn't seen him properly for some time. It wasn't until now that I saw he was in rough shape. The hair around his temples was falling off, revealing a scaly patchwork of dying skin. One of his eyes looked sunken, and he couldn't open it. He lost a lot of color, and I could smell something metallic on his breath. His tongue was almost gray, and I could see long strands of metal coming out of his skull, mixing into his hair. He grunted when he moved, and I could see the signs of immense joint pain. John wasn't doing well. Not well at all. "What did she make you do?" I asked, trying to keep my mind off the pain.
"You don't want to know," he sighed, "but it's done. We can't be near those people."
"There's one less. She killed him."
"Not for long."
I didn't even question it. At least we had the place to ourselves. Roy didn't come around anymore, and Leah was adamant about staying away. We got the place until the year walk was over, and John was trying his best to help me. Since my finger couldn't be recovered, he did what he could to help me heal. Even without his gadgets and machines, he was quite handy, got me a cast and everything. It was apparent that John wasn't getting his treatments, whatever those were. He was getting worse and fast. Even though I was the one with a missing finger, John was in much worse shape. Over the next few days, I'd see his joints lock up mid-stride, causing him to cramp and crash into the floor. Once, when he drank water, I saw steam coming out of his nose. At times I could hear a sizzling noise, and he'd lock himself in the bathroom. He did his best to stifle his cries of pain, but it was a small apartment. I heard everything. I guess it came as no surprise that Oliver moved out. I didn't answer when he knocked on my door that last time. I was a hazard to him and all his friends. That much was certain. I wouldn't risk all of them a second time. John wasn't taking any chances. If it meant the two of us being locked inside that apartment for 2 months straight, he was fine with it. Going crazy together was better than being murdered. If we could just hold out a little longer, the year walk would be over. But then again, by the look of it, Uncle John didn't have that kind of time left. For 2 weeks, we lived on nothing but old movies and takeaway. John slept on the couch while I got the bed. He made all arrangements on our single phone, not taking any chances by bringing in more devices than necessary. By now, I could see why John was quirky. He knew about the dangers that roamed out there. No wonder he made his own stuff and isolated himself. It must have taken him years to get to a point where he could sleep at night. I could tell John was getting worse, but he refused to talk about it. He couldn't open his one eye, and when he tried, I could hear some kind of mechanical whirring. Sometimes when he coughed, I could hear a metallic reverb. Some days he'd just stay on the couch, unable to move. Not just like in hurting too much to move, but in the literal sense that he couldn't. By mid-November, it was clear that John wasn't going to make it much longer. He didn't sleep, eat, or drink. Even though he usually did so less than other people, now he wasn't doing it at all. His breathing was forced, and he'd stopped talking. There were these razor-sharp metal flakes falling off of him, and I got cut a few times trying to clean them up. Finally, I sat down by his side and held his hand, ice cold. "John," I said, You gotta help me. What can I do?" He gestured with a finger for me to come closer. His voice was barely audible. Nothing, he wheezed.
do? Nothing.
A faint smile. He was asking me to let him pass, to stay there and wait for the year to be over, whatever the cost. Yeah. No, that wasn't happening. What was he gonna do? Stop me? I tucked him in and put out a big glass of sugar water with a straw straight to his mouth. I took his phone and wallet. Then I left the apartment for the first time in weeks. I could hear him wheezing, a weak protest. But I wouldn't let him die. Walking down the hall, I checked his phone. Several anonymous numbers saved, unmarked and never dialed. They could mean anything and led anywhere, but I had to try. There was no one in reception, no one in the hallways, no Leah, no Roy, just me and a phone. Stepping outside, it was already dark. I hadn't considered checking the time. I'd stopped checking the time of day weeks ago. The days sort of blended together in isolation. A stiff breeze chilled me as I scrolled through the numbers. Nothing in particular stood out. None of them were local or even recognizable. Maybe none of them would help. After all, if there was something that could be done, wouldn't John have done it already? I selected a number at random and called. There was a short connection tone, then a click. Silence. Then a warm breath creeping into my ear canal. Somewhere in the back of my mind, an image came to me. The image of a cold cliffside leading to a raging sea. Dying November grass under my naked feet. And there, by the edge, a woman in white, asking us to die for her. And we all did, gladly. It wasn't my memory. It wasn't someone else's either. It was like an emotion, so specific in nature that I could summarize it in a made-up word that passed through my mind. A word that was whispered through my phone and nestled into my head. I dropped the phone, hearing only static on the other side. Static that resonated in my head, bouncing between my thoughts. A static with little secrets hidden to all but those forced to listen. I could hear her, feel her, a calling for me to embrace her. And for a moment I wanted to join them. I wanted to jump off that cliff. Then my world went dark as I passed out in the parking lot. Of course I was an idiot, but I had to try. Anything. Seeing John like that broke my heart. Waking up without the slightest idea of where you are or how long you've been there is something you never get used to. It was one of the most disorienting things you can experience. And this was nothing short of a nightmare. "Kill me," something whispered. "Kill me, please." I woke up. I thought I'd gone blind. I blinked and blinked, but the room stayed dark. Damp, moist ground, thick stone walls choking all sound. My hands shackled to the wall, and my legs tied together. I could hear rattling chains. "Please, kill me. Please." A second voice, coarse, old. "Kill me. Please. Please." A third. I must have laid there for an hour or so. My head still spinning, felt like vertigo, like standing at the edge of a cliff. I cursed myself. I'd been so close to finishing this whole year, and this might be where it all came to an end. Taken into some underground madhouse and left to die. I must have laid there for hours. Then, a gasp. A group of people gasping all at once. "Yes!" They gasped.
Yes, we will. Then she will kill us. Yes, yes.
A door swung open, blinding me. I could make out vague silhouettes of people, naked men and women, young and old, covered in gashes, boils, and dirt, all with the biggest smiles on their faces. Even there, blinded by the sudden light, I could see their pupils growing large with excitement. They started grabbing me, tearing at the chains, shaking hands, holding me with the strength of a primate.
Take him! Yes, yes, yes!
I tried to stay upright and walk on my own, but they were so eager to pull me along that they almost carried me. 6 of them in total, but I could see more coming around. I'd been locked in a root cellar in the middle of nowhere, and they dragged me outside into the November sun. At first I thought I was in a cornfield, but the color was off. My eyes had trouble adjusting. I could see more of them, at least 20. Some wore masks, muffling their voices. Others chirped, some croaked. One guy looked like he wore a boar mask, but it seemed so real that it might as well have been an upright animal. I felt like a lamb pushed to slaughter. Considering I was a Yearwalker, it might not be far from the truth. Maybe they were looking to kill me, to give me to whatever leader they worshipped, a free wish for whatever being could break me. They held me down to the ground, pushing my face into the mud. And there she was, the woman in white. She was about 6 feet tall and dressed in this luminescent white, matching her impossible skin tone. She held out her hands as if to embrace me, but nothing came of it. Then there was her face, a jumbled mess of moving cartilage, muscle, and exposed flesh. Not a single discernible tooth, eye, or facial structure. Just this mess, moving all on its own. A den of vipers. She spoke, not through her mouth, but through every electronic device in the field, every unpowered speaker, every cell phone, all of it. You appear before the blameless. An excited rattle shook the field, not just from the followers, but the field itself, shaking in response. On the end of your path, I will cease your suffering, and with your end, I will bring that of others. She turned towards the followers. Soon, children, a blessing. A chorus of pleas, bursting static, these broken and beaten madmen begging for their idol to kill them. And she would not indulge. Instead, she laughed. Something in me remembered that laugh, as if I'd heard it before. It was the same kind of feeling you would get when you look at a branch, not sure if it was a snake or not. That terrible, sinking unease. My eyes cleared as I looked around. This wasn't just any field. It was all sunflowers. Blue ones. Return him, she spoke. Prepare the pacifier. Her voice came from everywhere. The field of blue sunflowers shivered and shook from her command. These dry plants, falling apart at the slightest motion, still couldn't help themselves. And neither could the madman. They dragged me back to the root cellar, locking me in this completely black room. Nothing but stone walls and a damp floor. I could hear them outside praying for death, for her, for some nonsense I couldn't even understand. And every now and then, I could hear her voice in the distance, resonating through whatever electronics these people had gathered. And the ground shivered every time. I tried to get out of my shackles, to fight back, to do something. But as day turned to night, only glimpses of light would come and go as they opened the door to throw me something barely edible in a plastic water bottle. Whatever the pacifier was, it took time to prepare. Days. Every time that door opened, I winced. I imagined them dragging me out to be sacrificed or lobotomizing me. I imagined them opening my rib cage and eating my heart. I could see their faces in my mind's eye, frantic, unblinking, and ecstatic. But as one day turned to several, it didn't seem like they were eager to kill me. I've thought a lot about this since. I believe that whoever kills the Yearwalker doesn't just get a wish fulfilled. They take their place. Meaning they, too, can be hunted and killed. So what was happening here was most likely not mercy, but waiting for the year to come closer to an end, so that my killer would have no competition. And it got me thinking, what if that had been the strategy of others? There had been several people who'd helped me. How could I trust that their true motive wasn't just to keep me alive long enough to take me out later? Maybe that was the plan. Maybe I was truly alone. At the very least, it felt that way. Lying on the dirty floor for days on end, crying in the dark. Time passes differently in a place like that. Night and day were an illusion. I kept drifting in and out of sleep, swaying from exhausted to wide awake within what seemed like minutes. Sometimes my imagination would run so wild that I'd trick myself in hysteric panic. It might have been weeks, but if I'm honest, I think it was at most a couple of days. One night, as I twisted and turned, I noticed one of my shackles bending differently when I put it at a certain angle. Using a rock and pushing at it, I managed to widen a gap big enough to slip my hands through. From there, I could untie my legs. But that was it. How the hell do you get away from a place like that? There were always half a dozen people outside, waiting for me to do something stupid. Was escape even an option? The next time the door would open, I'd be ready. I held the chains from my shackles as a weapon, ready to attack whoever came in. I must have stood there for hours, trying not to breathe too loudly. They might be mad and barely cognizant, but they were eager to please their mistress. So I waited, and just like the madmen outside, I prayed. When light finally broke through the door, I swung. I swung so hard my arm nearly gave out. And as soon as the chain connected with something, I took off running. He was a man in his 60s, wearing some kind of tribal-inspired plastic mask made from a bent cutting board. I'd hit him square in the throat, sending him gagging to the ground. I didn't even try to check on him. I just ran. But as I did, I could feel a desperate hand reaching for me, trying not to save his life, but to fulfill his order to stop me. It was night, but I didn't care. This was my best shot at getting away. I ran past nightmarish faces, smiling in a way that showed as much teeth as possible. Large, unblinking eyes almost shining white, even in the dark. I pushed past them, surprising them, and ran straight into the field of sunflowers.
Thank you!
I heard them screaming.
She will reward me! Yes! The reward is mine!
They were laughing, singing, whooping, and running with complete abandon to catch me. The dried and dying field collapsed before me as rustling intensified behind me. They were gaining on me. Something heavy flew past me, a rock perhaps. I kept my head down and kept pushing forward, but it was getting harder and harder. It was as if the sunflowers were trying to stop me, getting so close to one another that I could almost climb on top of them.
"I have the pacifier!"
One of them cheered.
"I will be rewarded!"
Others were excited. They all were. I had countless little cuts across my legs and stomach as I tried pushing through the field. Suddenly, something struck me. This enormous weight came down on my left shoulder blade, completely throwing me off balance. I tumbled to the ground, landing hard on my arm, the same arm where I'd lost my ring finger. The pain was bad enough to knock the air out of me. I barely had time to react as someone straddled me, and before I had the chance to protest, something pierced my skin. Something cold started to run into me as I felt around for something to grab. Finally, my hand settled on what had hit me in the first place, this large, fist-sized rock. I swung it around, connecting with my assailant square in the face, knocking him off me. With my other hand, I pulled out what had been stuck into my chest, a syringe, small but surprisingly heavy. From the light of dozens of little screens, I could see them come towards me. I could see their excited faces. However, the man I'd beaten didn't look exhausted. No, he looked terrified.
"No,"
he cried. She
must kill me! Not you! Not you! Not—"
Rock in hand, I attacked. 48 hits. I counted them off one by one. I could barely see his face in the dark, but with every hit, the others stopped. They were eager to die, but not to me. Not like this. I killed that man without a second thought. With every hit, his face disappeared into the gore and mud. When I finally got up, they all stood in a circle around me, shocked. They had never considered I might fight back, that I might take whatever paradise they envisioned from them. They were just as afraid as I was, and yet they couldn't leave. We just stood there, looking at one another, and every time I turned away, I could hear them creeping up behind me. I saw the outlines of their homemade masks. Some who chose not to wear one had such a terrifying face that it was hard to tell if it was real.
"Pacify him,"
the woman in white spoke. The voice echoed through the fields, resonating through dying speakers and old phones. And those two words changed everything. Suddenly, the attack began anew. Throwing my rock, I heard it connect with something wooden, a mask, perhaps. Either way, it sent one of them sprawling to the ground, giving me an opportunity to run. A storm of voices and a rumble overhead. They weren't gonna hesitate this time. I made my way to the tree line. Somewhere along the way, they lost sight of me, allowing me to stay low. It started to rain, masking my movement further. Still, I could hear them skulking around, looking for me, and if I could hear them, they could probably hear me too. The rain quickly picked up, turning into an ice-cold downfall. It soaked into my clothes, making me shiver. I could feel a painful warmth radiating from where I had been struck with that syringe. Not to mention my messed up shoulder and my finger. God damn it! Moving through a forest in the dark is a dumb idea. I stepped through all kinds of underbrush and uneven ground, almost breaking my leg. Getting stuck in roots, breaking branches. There's no way to just be quiet, rain or no. and every time I gained ground, they'd pick up my trail. They were relentless, and there were more of them, over a dozen. I finally made it into a small dirt road. It wasn't much, but at least I could move a bit quicker. The rain was picking up, and I could hear the rumble of thunder. But it didn't take long for them to follow. They figured it out, and they were eager to pick up the pace. I couldn't. I could barely go on. They were gaining on me fast, cheering all the way, and when a pain ran through my chest, I had to stop. I doubled over, sinking my knees into the wet mud. A flash of lightning lit up the sky, and for a moment, I saw all my assailants. They stopped. I got up on my feet and looked at them. All of them suddenly stopped. Was it the lightning? Is that it? I huffed. You're done? No response. They just stared at me. Fuck you! I spat. But from behind me, further down the road, I heard a croaking sound. In another flash of lightning, I saw her. A gray hoodie and a black pixie haircut. The escapee from the hatchet base. And there she stood, drinking the rain. We were on hatchet ground. What happened next was fast. They came out of the woods, rain drinkers and madmen, wrestling to the death in the downpour. I just stood there, watching chaos unfold around me. Masks breaking, throats trying to inhale the rain, croaking, punching, kicking, strangling. It was brutal, and I had no intention of staying. As I turned to run, I came face to face with the woman with the black pixie haircut. She put a single hand on my shoulder and tilted her head down to look at me. Our eyes met. She leaned in and tried to clear her throat. On the first try, nothing happened, but on the second, I could make out 2 words. Thank God. With her permission, I limped away. Hours passed, and so did my shivers. I felt this incredible warmth emanating from my chest. I wasn't tired, hungry, or thirsty anymore. I was just decent. I could do this. Or maybe I couldn't. Maybe whatever they shot into me just wanted me to think I was okay. Either way, I kept walking. I followed the small roads. I followed the highway. I kept going in a daze until early morning turned to afternoon. I had no idea how long I'd been gone. For a short while, I could see my breath, but I wasn't cold. I was soaking wet and wounded, but I still felt okay. That worried me. At some point, I started to recognize the area. I turned off to a side road, followed it, and realized where I was. I was just minutes away from where Evan's house had been. From there, I could make my way back to town. I knew the way by heart. By now, my legs were on autopilot, and minutes later, I walked past the driveway to Evan's yard and saw, to my great surprise, that the house had returned.